Project for today is going to be this Cub Cadet rear tine tiller. It's a RT65 model. It's got a Honda GC190 engine on it, but when you turn it over, you can hear it hit something really hard. So it's either got, I think these had the timing belt in them or a timing chain, one or the other. So it's either that's broken and a valve is stuck open, it's banging the piston, or the connecting rod is broke. So I'm gonna pull the spark plug and the valve cover and we'll see what we got going on in there. But I'm thinking it's not looking great for this engine unless it's just a stuck valve or something. So I'll get you set up and we'll get started. So I'll pull the spark plug first. Oh, that was really tight. I've been getting lucky on these projects lately that I think are gonna be a bad one, but I think my luck's running out because I don't think that piston is moving. I'll grab a screwdriver, see if I can push it down. Probably can't really see in there, but yeah, it's got a broken rod. I can push the piston down. Now it's locked up on me, but I could push the piston down and it would push it back up, but then once it got to the top, it didn't suck it back down. So this one's probably not worth fixing the engine. So I've got a couple of Briggs and Stratton engines that I think are decent, so we'll get started pulling this one off of here, and then maybe in another video I'll do a little autopsy on this one and we'll see what's actually going on with it. So I'll start yanking this one off of here. The first thing I'll do is take this shield off. It's kind of a combination of fasteners here. There's a 10mm down there, and then we've got some T27 Torx up on top, and then there's a bolt here I think holds the tensioner. I'll take this nut off of here and I'll do the Torx. I think the Torx are the last thing. This tiller doesn't look like it was used a heck of a lot unless they just took really good care of it, but those Hondas are usually fairly decent engines. That's one of the lower quality Hondas that you can get. Any of the GC series are a little bit lower quality, but they're still a decent engine. But a lot of it comes down to maintenance. Might have been one they ran out of oil, or they never changed the oil in it. It's pretty black. Oop. You can see that's pretty black oil, but it is full of oil. But I have gotten some stuff where they'll fill it up with oil once it ends up blowing up on them and think that they to bring it back, which sometimes you can if they just seized up from the heat, but they'll usually always burn oil after that. So it looks like some 1/2-inch bolts. Oh, that's a 9/16. These are half though. Belt guide. See if we can work the belt off, but can't spin the. Oh, I suppose it's because the engine won't turn. I was thinking I could work it off of there, but well, that has a split pulley on it. Boy, I'm surprised that came off for how rusty that was. So get that off of there. Well, we should just have the motor mount bolts, and this one should come off of there. Let me see if I can get the Milwaukee ratchet in here and make this go a little faster. These are self-locking nuts, so they move hard the whole way. two. The other ones are kind of buried down in here. Got the last one in the back here. It should be loose. Should be able to pull it off of there now. So this is the engine I have to replace it with. It feels like it has decent compression, but it has been sitting a long time and there is a little bit of water in the fuel tank, I noticed, so I'll have to go through that. But for now, I think I'm just going to get it bolted on there so it's easier to work on, and then hopefully the bolt pattern is the same. So we'll get that put on there and go from there. It looks like the bolt holes line up, but this uses 5/16 bolts, and these are 3/8 bolts. So I'll have to grab a couple different bolts to put in there. Well, I got it bolted down. I did that off camera. The furnace was running, so I figured it's not too exciting anyway, just putting bolts in. So a couple things I noticed with this engine is the throttle is loose and not really doing anything, which we have to pull this tank off anyway. But I'll pull the air cleaner off first so we can get to that carburetor. That looks pretty dirty. I kind of wonder if this engine didn't come from a tiller in the first place. And we've got some breather hose here. I'll pull that off all the way. It did look like it was overfilled with oil, is what I'm thinking is a lot of this oil that's sprayed everywhere. A couple of 5/16 bolts here. And one up here. There we go. Kind of comes out sideways. And the gas line. And we should have just a couple of 3/8 bolts back here holding the carburetor up. And we just got to kind of turn it sideways to get it unhooked from the throttle linkage. That. I'll have to clean that up before I tear it apart. It's pretty filthy. So to pull the tank off, there's a couple of bolts in the side here, and this piece on the throttle should just pull off of here. There we go. And then just those 5/16 bolts to get this little trim piece off. And there's one back here. That slides off. The gas does have to be in the off position when you do that. It's got the little notch there. And then we can get to our bolts that actually hold the tank on. Which I think those are 3/8 bolts. Yeah. There's 2 on that side and 1 on the other side. Get that off of there. And then our problem with the throttle is I'm thinking they had a throttle cable on this, so you loosen this nut here so the cable is holding it. I'll get a ratchet for that. So we'll just snug this down. You don't want to go too tight on them or you won't be able to move the throttle. And that looks pretty good. That just pulls this spring here on the governor arm. That's full throttle, and then that's idle. I think that'll work. I might put a little bit of lube in there just so it slides a little bit better, but you can just loosen it, but there's a bunch of dirt and stuff in there, so I'll clean that up too. So I got the carburetor cleaned up, and we'll pull the float bowl off, see what it looks like on the inside. I'm hoping it's not too bad. There was water in the tank, but sometimes it doesn't get down into the carburetor. That actually doesn't look bad at all. Our float height might not be. It's a little bit high, I think, but what happens is the needle seat, it'll swell with ethanol fuel in it, and this will get pushed up like that some of the time. But I think that should be okay to run. It should be a little bit closer to level, but it doesn't look like it's too far off, so I think that'll be okay. But yeah, it doesn't look too bad at all. I'll just rinse that out and we'll see if it'll run with that. With this one, the main jet is in the bottom bolt. There's a hole down the center, so make sure that's clear. And then there's a hole in the side that runs all the way through. I usually will take my light and look through and make sure you can see a light through that center hole and it's clear. So that should be good. I rinsed the float bowl out and it's nice and clean now. So we'll put our needle and float back. A little chunk of something on there. And our gasket back on. The float bowl gasket stayed on the carburetor. And we'll test it real quick. It's a little pop-off gauge for testing the float. I have the carburetor upside down. These gravity flow systems, if they hold 5 pounds, they're pretty much good. Then I kind of just shake it to get the release the pressure. So that should be fine. So now we got to get the gas tank cleaned out. I did drain it out, but those gas tanks on this style Briggs have a lot of nooks and crannies that you have to get cleaned out. So I'll show you how I do that. So I just kind of fold up a shop towel, and then I use this little grabber tool. I'll put in there, and I go around and try to soak up all the moisture. The screen inside the tank that filters the fuel is usually, it's such a fine screen that water actually has a hard time going through it. It can get through, but as you're draining it, you're not really getting it all. It'll leave some leftover residue in there. You can see all that moisture. Usually it'll take quite a few rags, but if it's not a filthy, dirty tank, I'll save the rags and just let them dry, and I'll reuse them. Then as the last step, I'll just take the air hose and I'll blow air in it for probably a good 60 seconds or so to make sure it gets any of the leftover moisture dried out of it. I got the tank good and dry now, so I think we'll throw some new fuel lines on it, and then we can put the tank back on, and then we'll get to putting the carburetor back on it. Well, it's easy to get to with all this stuff off. I'll pull the spark plug. We'll see how that looks. That doesn't look too terrible. It's a little bit black, but I don't think it's an oil burner anyway. Usually the plug will be pretty caked. So this is a RC12YC Champion, and I'll just throw a new one in it since I've got it out. So we'll throw our new plug in here. Then we can start putting on new gas lines. I did blow that off with air while I had the air hose out. I'll probably clean it up a little bit more once I know that it's a good runner. I pulled the clamp off the fuel line there. Might be a little bit of moisture left in that bottom part. I blew some air through there. That should be fine now. So we'll pull these clamps off. I'll see what lengths I need for line. Oh, that one got lucky and landed on the bench. Sometimes these clamps get kind of bent and it can be difficult to take on and off, but these spring style clamps do work really well. Because as the line gets older, it'll actually keep squeezing pressure on it. Where the screw style clamps are just they're at one tension all the time, so they can work their way loose. So we need a short one. These are fairly important to get the right length since they don't really fit any other way. And this little cutter, I call it a cigar cutter, is kind of what it looks like, but they can be really handy for doing this kind of stuff. It beats trying to use a knife or a side cutters or anything. And that one, that's not quite long enough. I was hoping I could use up my scraps. When you get doing a lot of this line, you end up with a lot of short scraps from the new boxes. I'll kind of bend that over. That one might be a tad too long, but it should work. Make sure we don't have anything in the end of our valve. Ooh, clamp fell off there. spin the clamps so they don't interfere with the tank. This line's so short, you almost need to squeeze the clamp while you're pushing it down or it interfered with it. So that should be good. So now we'll get to putting the carburetor on. So I just started the bolts in the carburetor, make it a little bit easier. We have to get this throttle linkage in there. This spring can be a little bit difficult. I think I bent it a little bit. And I pulled it out of there. And I bent it back. This has kind of a spacer in there, you just gotta make sure it's still in the right spot. Now, use a ratchet to tighten them down all the way. That on there. Now I can put this tank back. Slide that fuel line on there. I have had, since these tanks do have all the nooks and crannies in them that can hold moisture, I have had them where I've got them to run and then I still had to take the float bowl off and get a little bit of excess moisture out of it because it was hidden in there somewhere and it ended up getting past. So I think we can bolt the tank down. One on the other side. This is similar to the engine that was on that wood splitter video I did. It was an intek like this. I think this one might be a little bit bigger though. This is a 6 horsepower, so this will actually be a upgrade power wise. That was a Honda GC190 on there, so that would be, I'm guessing, around 5 horsepower, something like that. Put this little piece back on there. Make sure our valve fits there. Those were a 5/16. Make sure our valve still works. So I've had them where they kind of get in there wrong, so the valve will turn hard. I'll put this little piece back on. Now our throttle stays. I didn't see a shutoff, though. I'm hoping that when you idle it back all the way, it hits a shutoff. I should have looked at that while it was off of there. The tank was off of there, I mean. You can kind of see I can get the light right. There's a little tab in that hole. Now when you shut it off, it touches that and grounds it out, so that's our shut off. And there's wires underneath here. You can see where it goes to that shut off. So that should be good. I always want to make sure I have a way to shut stuff off when I get it running. I've had some stuff where you try to choke it to get it shut off and you still can't get it. You almost have to get your hand over the air cleaner and plug it off to get it to kill, or you have to yank the spark plug wire. So it's always good to check to make sure, especially if it gets stuck full throttle or something. So we'll put the air cleaner assembly back on. It had a spot underneath. There's a hole there where this breather tube goes into. I guess I'll have to put that in once I already get the bolts in, because it's in the way to put the bolts in. And then we've had a gasket that went in between. So that'll go like that. Get the bolt started so we don't lose our gasket. I was gonna just try to run it without putting all this back together, but some of these don't run right without the air cleaner housing. And there's the little bolt up top. And I did clean up this stuff. It was pretty filthy. So towards the gas tank is choke. I don't know if there was any markings on that. Oh yeah, it said choke right there. Kind of hits that gas line. One thing about these plastic parts, they get kind of warped. I'll put that breather tube up in there. It's important you make sure that breather tube is seated, because it's gonna suck a bunch of dirty air through the bottom there if it's not seated. So I've got the gas turned on. So I think we'll throw some gas in it and see if it'll fire up. I already checked the oil and that was okay. It's a little bit over full, but I think it'll be fine to just test run, and then we're gonna change it right away anyway. So I'll get some gas and we'll see what it'll do. All right, I put some gas in it. I don't have that. We'll have to figure out the pulley system and everything too, but I just wanted to make sure that we got it to run okay. We are leaking a little bit of gas out of the carburetor. It almost seems like that seal on the bottom of the float bowl didn't seal maybe. It's not leaking too much though. We'll see if it'll run anyway. The choke on. Oops. I'd call that a good engine. It sounds pretty good and quiet. It does have a tiny bit of a surge when it was running at full throttle, but sometimes when they're not under a load, they'll do that anyway. So we'll continue on with this one. I think I'll grab my oil suction tool and I'll suck the oil out of it right now. That way, while it's had just been stirred up like that, we'll get that old oil out of there and fill it up, and then we'll figure out what we need to do for pulleys. It looks like it'll be lined up with the pulley all the way into here, but I need a spacer in here because this crank is a little bit longer, and then we might have to space that cover out a little bit because this might hit, but this is threaded, so I don't want to just cut that off or anything. I'll see if I can do this without making too much of a mess since it is overfilled a little bit. So this oil extractor, you just pump the top there, that handle goes up and down, or you can hook an air hose to it, but I found it's just easier just to pump the top like 5 times and it's enough to suck the oil out. You can see the drain plug there. I could have done it while the engine was not on here, but it's just easier when it's bolted down, and this would have made a mess if I drained it. You can see it kind of drains down through there. The other one was kind of the same way, how it drained. So I'll get this sucked out and then we'll get to filling it up. So I got it filled with oil. It held a 1/2 quart of oil, and I used a 30 weight oil in these. So we're gonna slide that on this belt. Let's see here, all that. I think our cable is a little bit sticky. We'll have to lube that up some. Get it as loose as it'll go. It's kind of lucky that the crankshafts were the same size so this pulley fits, but otherwise I could have just sized that pulley. So then I'm gonna have to put a spacer in here. Let's take up this space, otherwise that pulley will walk back and forth. So I'll look for something I can put in there for a spacer. So this is what I came up with. It's actually just another pulley that I ended up sliding on there. It's not the best looking setup, but it works. I had a bunch of washers and stuff here that were clutch shims and everything that I could have, but I would have had to stack so many in there. It would have been kind of ridiculous having that in there. And this is still balanced then because it's a pulley off a snowblower. So I think that'll work. We've got to still fix that leak on the carburetor, and then that cable for the belt tensioner. So I lubed up the cable for this tensioner, and now it works. If you let off it real slow, it kind of stays, but you can kind of just push it back down. But what I narrowed it down to was this cable is actually working okay, but this, where the handle goes in, is kind of bent. I did try to grind a little bit off the end of the cable, or this arm, but it still seems like it's a little bit catchy. But we'll see what it does when it's running, if it'll release or not. But I want to see if I can get that cover on without it hitting this pulley. I'm thinking it's going to be pretty far away. Yeah, we're quite a ways out where it hits. So I think I can bolt it down like that, I think, and it won't hit. So I can put this bolt here in and the one up here, and then we'll see if I could space that other one out a little bit. It's still covering most of the belt. It doesn't look too ridiculous. So we'll see if we can get this belt guide. Oh, it does line up. That's what's kind of nice about a lot of these newer engines, is the stuff does line up usually. I have noticed, I've had a couple of riding mowers that had the Kohler Courage engines on it, and those do have a different bolt pattern than everything else. Because if you've ever had a mower with those single cylinder Kohler Courage engines, there's a reason they say you need a lot of courage to own one of them, because they do not last very long. I've seen a few with pretty high hours on them, but they seem like they had a lot of work done to them. Their main issue was oil leaking. I had a lot of them that I ended up changing head gaskets and stuff on that were just leaking oil, which people don't pay attention to the oil level, and then they end up burning the engine down. But also I saw a lot of them with cracked blocks, which that is not a maintenance issue. They just made the castings too weak, and the cylinder would actually rip right off of the block or the crankcase. Okay, so now that's on there. That's quite a ways out, so I almost need to make a little spacer piece that comes out with another hole in it so I can get that bolt in, because I'd like to still get at least the 4 bolts in it, or there was one on the bottom, one on top, and then these two, so there was 4 total. The bottom one will be easy. I could just put a spacer in there, so maybe I'll just do that and then have 3. That's one thing when you end up modifying stuff like this. There's always something that doesn't fit quite right, and if you don't want it to look all rigged together, you've got to do a little bit of fabricating. So I ended up getting this bolt down here and this one up here, and I didn't get this one, but I did get this one under here. I put a spacer in there to space it out, and then it does look a little bit goofy, but I think that'll be just fine. You're not really getting too much crap up in the belt on these. Usually most of the stuff is back here by the, if it was a front tine tiller, I'd worry a little more about sticks and stuff flying up in there. But I think I'll put the lift down now, and we'll try it and make sure the tines work and the drive works and everything, and that belt releases. All right, I got the lift down. I cleaned up a few of the tools, and we'll see, we'll fire it up and see how the transmission and stuff works. but that belt is still, the belt tensioner is still sticking, and I don't really like that, so I'm gonna have to try to figure out what's going on in here. You can see, you go down, you can push it down that much farther. It's not going down as far as it should. So I don't know if that's a cable problem or if it's something in here, because it does feel like it binds. What I think I'll do is take this off, and then I can move this back and forth and see how it goes. Because really there's still some tension on here, so it should let it go back. I could try adjusting this part a little bit maybe too, but I don't know if that's gonna help. If you just let it snap back like that, it's fine. But if you just let it go slow, it doesn't go all the way. That's back all the way. So what happened here is it looks like this is another thing that came from a scrap guy. So it was just loaded on a trailer kind of haphazardly. So what happened was is these are bent together too close. So with this disconnected, I still have to push pretty hard to get that to go down. It only wants to go down to about here. So I've tried bending them just by hand, but they're pretty tough. So I've got this jack. It doesn't really quite fit in there, but I'm gonna try to see if it'll push. It's not the safest thing in the world, but see, now it falls down like it should. I don't know if we went far enough. So it kind of springs back. No, we didn't go far enough. Must have had something really heavy. Must have had something really heavy on its side or something. But that is some really springy steel. Usually you bend it about double past what you wanted to get to. Yeah, that doesn't want to bend. I'm gonna have to figure out something better because this is gonna slip out of there. I can just see it moving when I'm turning it. I'll try it one more time, but I don't like that, how much tension is on there, and then if it slips. I maybe could just leave it for a little bit. I don't think it needs to bend much. It's just like a 1/4 inch maybe. There's just not enough room in that tube for that curl on the end of the linkage piece here. Well, let's see what that does. If that doesn't do it, I'm gonna have to figure out something else. Yeah, it's still not going down as far as it should. So I'm gonna take this out of here. I can show you the end where it hooks in there. I did grind on the end of it to see if that would make more room. I could grind on this end too, because I think what's happening is as it comes around, it's hitting the bottom piece there because everything's kind of bent. We'll try this one more time. We'll try it this way this time. So went a long ways this time. I don't see how it could spring back all the way now. I think we moved it some because I couldn't even get close to fitting the jack in there. Now I can. So I'll try putting this in there. It still doesn't want to go down all the way. And as I pull it, you can see it drops down. I think we did a little bit that time though. I think I got it now. I'm going to try running it again to see if that'll help. That seemed to work better. Before it was kind of dragging me around unless I snapped that cable back down by hand. So now I think we can fix that leak on the carburetor and this thing will be pretty much good to go, I think. So I'm going to pull this float bowl back off of here and drain a little bit of gas out of it. So what I'm thinking our problem is this gasket right here. Looks like it's kind of smashed in. So I'll find another gasket for that and then it shouldn't leak on us. Well, I didn't find a new gasket, but I found one that was better than what was in there. You kind of got to be careful pulling the bowl off of these when they're on the engine because you can slide it against the side and scoop up some crap in there. So I'll leave that on for a while and see if it starts to drip again. One more thing I want to do on here that drives me insane is when people put these tires on backwards. And this one you can flip the rim around, it has a hole in it on the other side. So we'll take that off and flip that around so it matches the other side. So I let it sit for a little while and the carburetor doesn't seem to be leaking. Get it jacked up a little bit to get that wheel off. Hopefully it slides off of there. Oh yeah. We'll put a little bit of anti-seize on that axle. They don't lube these from the factory, so the wheels will get rusted on there a lot of the time. So it's good to put something on there. There we go. That looks a lot better with both the wheels facing the same direction. You can't really see each from both sides, but that's just a pet peeve of mine. When they put tires on backwards, these are designed to go one direction, so. But I think that's almost everything we needed to do on this thing. Well, I think that's about all we can do on this one. It's pretty cold outside now, so we can't really go test or anything. The ground's frozen, so when it warms up, I'll probably give it a bath. It needs one. It's got a bunch of grime and stuff on this side of the engine, isn't too great, so I'll get it cleaned up and ready for spring. But that's gonna do it for this one. If you like this sort of thing, like the videos and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.